Captive Daughter of Zion, an icon used in the Pentecost service at the Metropolitan Community Church of Manchester on Sunday the 12th of June 2011. The icon was painted by Robert Lentz and helped us reflect on the theme of tension and tradition. Lentz is a contemporary American artist. He's gay and comes from an Eastern Orthodox Christian background, and he uses the colour and style of Eastern icons in his work. He's a lay member of the Order of Friars Minor, commonly known as the Franciscans, and has been criticised by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church for the gay themes in his art. He's particularly noted for creating icons of paired saints who are often thought to be gay, though often these saints aren't ones many of us have heard of because they come from the very early church. Sergius and Bacchus are two of these paired saints. They are Roman soldiers who were martyred for their Christian faith. They are always portrayed as a pair, and recent scholarship has looked at the earliest sources about them, and it's clear that they were openly gay but secretly Christian, quite the reverse of many people today. They were martyred in the year 303 in what is now Syria, and their feast day is the 7th of October. They were discovered to be Christian as they wouldn't sacrifice to the gods, and then were humiliated by being dressed in women's clothes on their way to execution, although they said that as women weren't humiliated by these clothes, why would they be? Perpetua and Felicity were brave North African women friends who were killed for their Christian faith, also in the 3rd century, and their feast day is March the 7th. The details of their imprisonment are known because Perpetua kept a journal, the first known written document by a woman in Christian history. In fact, her Passion of St. Perpetua, St. Felicity and their companions was so revered in North Africa that St. Augustine warned people not to treat it like the Bible. People loved the story of the two women comforting each other in jail and giving each other the kiss of peace as they met their end. Their names are familiar to Catholics because Perpetua and Felicity are included in the first Eucharistic prayer of the Mass. Perpetua was a 22-year-old noblewoman and a nursing mother. Felicity, her slave, gave birth to a daughter while they were in prison. Although she was married, Perpetua does not mention having a husband in the narrative. They were arrested for their Christian faith, imprisoned together, and they held on to each other in the amphitheatre at Carthage shortly before their execution on March the 7th. Lentz portrays them as a loving couple with a heart in the background. There's nothing to indicate they were lesbian, but Lentz portrays them as such. Lentz also has produced icons of contemporary people. This one is of Oscar Romero, Catholic Archbishop of San Salvador in El Salvador, who became radicalized due to the plight of the poor of his nation and the dreadful oppression they faced at the hands of the US-backed security forces that were assisting the dictator. He became more and more outspoken and was eventually assassinated by government forces in 1980. The people of El Salvador have hailed him as a saint, but the Vatican hasn't and probably won't because of his radical commitment to the poor and to the theology of liberation. Lentz portrays him as a saint in this picture, holding a child with a halo around his head, but if you look closely you'll see the ominous figure of helicopters of the armed services in the background. Possibly they're American helicopters. Certainly they give a threatening image to the icon, and are quite out of place with the saintly figure of Romero. More controversially, Lentz painted this icon with Gandhi portrayed as a saint. Gandhi's commitment to non-violence was impressive. He was the major figure in the move for Indian independence. He wanted a united country where Hindu and Muslim would live peacefully together, but this failed and India was divided into two countries, India and Pakistan. After independence, Gandhi was assassinated. This icon is controversial as it betrays the devout Hindu Gandhi as a Christian saint. And so we turn to the picture we looked at on Sunday, the image entitled Captive Daughter of Zion. In many ways it's a traditional image of Mary and Jesus. Mary is shown with a veil and looking particularly Jewish, but Jesus shown in the centre of her, almost as a cutout in a very typical way for Orthodox icons. If you look closely at the icon, you can see many Jewish features to it. Jesus is wearing a talit, a Jewish prayer shawl. He's holding the scrolls of the law used in synagogue worship, where they're taken out of the ark and brought to the reading platform and read by the cantor or the rabbi. If you look at Mary, she wears the yellow Star of David with the word Jude written in it. Jews in Europe were forced to wear this in Germany and other countries where Nazis were in control, in order to single them out and to make discrimination against them easier. In the background you see barbed wire. The title, Captive Daughter of Zion, evokes for me two particular feelings. The idea of Mary and of course Jesus being imprisoned. The barbed wire in the background reminds me of a Nazi concentration camp. And also the idea of Mary as daughter of Zion. This is an icon which very much portrays Mary and Jesus as Jewish. As you look at this picture, how do you feel? What feeling does the yellow Star of David and the barbed wire evoke in you? What feelings does the portrayal of Jesus wearing the Jewish prayer shawl and holding the scrolls of the Jewish law, the books we know as the first 5 in the Old Testament, evoke in you? How do you feel about this portrayal of Mary and Jesus as faithful Jewish people? Our sermon title this week was Tension and Tradition. We looked in the sermon at the Jewish roots of Pentecost, a harvest festival in Israel celebrating the giving of the law to the Jewish people. We think of Pentecost as the birthday of the Church, the day the Holy Spirit was given to the first disciples. Luke wants to contrast the giving of the law to the Jewish people and the giving of the Spirit to Christians. And it's easy for Christians to think of the Spirit replacing law. Often we hear ideas in Christianity of how legalistic the Jewish faith is compared to the so-called freedom of Christianity. Yet Christians can be very, very interested in law and rules and petty regulation. In Christian history, the Church quickly distanced itself from the synagogue in the Roman Empire. Very soon it didn't want to be associated with the Jewish faith. As more and more Gentiles became involved in the Church, so the links with Judaism became weaker and weaker. The rivalry between church and synagogue soon became fully fledged anti-Semitism. In medieval Europe, Jews were made to live in ghettos. They were discriminated against. In England, King John made them leave, and they stayed away from this country until Cromwell welcomed them back almost 400 years later. Luther, the great German reformer, wrote many dreadful and violent things about Jewish people, which meant that Hitler could use these writings to whip up hatred against the Jews for his own nation. Until comparatively recently, the Church has always portrayed Judaism as a dead religion and Jewish people in need of conversion, instead of seeing them as following an alternate, older covenant, an alternative to Christianity perhaps. Christians are often unaware of the Jewish roots of their faith. We're often unaware of the values and beliefs that are shared by both ourselves and Jewish people. The sermon, therefore, explored these tensions between Jew and Christian, law and spirit, and the faith of Mary and Jesus, Jewish or Christian. Robert Lentz, in this icon, reminds us of our Jewish heritage and the hatred that Christians have shown to Jews. Pentecost should remind us of the Spirit who came to make us draw close to God, the God who gave the precious law to the Jewish people. The earliest understanding of the Christian Church was that we had been incorporated into the chosen people, not that we had replaced them. Lentz holds a mirror up to us in this icon. Those of us who are lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgendered should understand the nature of being an outsider, being oppressed, being demonized. This should help us have some empathy for the Jewish people and sorrow for how our faith has treated them over the years.